Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. We're asking if you pardon Snowden. The panel evenly divided, although viewers on the hashtag F24debate, 72% say yes. We're talking about it with Zachary Miller, producer and director of the upcoming documentary Countermeasures, Unveiling the Global Surveillance State. From Washington, journalist and columnist James Kirchick is with us, a fellow with the Foreign Policy Initiative. From Seattle, former intelligence officer Navid Jamali, whose book How to Catch a Russian Spy tells his own story, and Fabrice Epelbois, who teaches information warfare at the French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po. On the hashtag F24debate, one viewer saying, for a pardon Snowden to work without dangerous precedent, there must first be a finding that his releases did not hurt legal intelligence operations. Do you take that point, Fabrice Epelbois?
I guess if I was an American citizen, I would definitely take it. But I'm French citizen. What I see in this case is a foreign government who's supposed to be an ally spying on our leader and seriously disrupting democracy in the world, not only in America, but in the world. And we're having the same problem. I totally agree with Jamal. We're having exactly the same problem in France. We're using the same kind of technology to do the same kind of things.
James Kirchick, if you were a French citizen, how would you react to the Snowden findings?
I think I would have reacted like most French people, which was express some sort of insincere outrage for about a day, and then go back to my regular life. I think most French people understand.
That's not French
people. This
is
how the French responded.
That's French politicians.
I thought the French were very mature about this. They understand that this is how the world works, and people and governments spy. Even friends. And so there was this sort of, sacre bleu on the front pages of all the newspapers, and then went back to normal. In Germany, for other different historical reasons, this is still a real serious political problem. But I think most French people understand that this is how it works, and they kind of shrug their shoulders, and that's the appropriate response.
No, you're kind of confusing French people and French politicians. French politicians, of course, knew about the Snowden affair before that, and they knew they were under surveillance. When it comes to French people, it's a totally different story. You probably don't see that from where you are, but it's a totally different story. The image of the United States of America have been really, really damaged here. That's because it had a profound impact. People do not trust American technology anymore. French people, European people do not trust American technology, and we are using American technology all the time. Like
and this is why I said this would. This is why
really,
this is
please don't confuse
yeah.
the French people and the things French politicians say. It's a very, very different story. In our country, what the politicians do not represent the French public opinion. It's a very big difference with the United States. Although you could complain about Trump.
When he spoke Wednesday from Moscow, Edward Snowden spoke to all he's done in his eyes to better a democracy. Let's take a listen.
After evidence of classified wrongdoing was revealed for the first time by our newspapers, some of these programs, which had been operating in secret for more than a decade, were ended or constrained by Congress and the courts. Technology companies have also begun to act, in some cases for the first time, to protect privacy and security in ways that benefit not only our people, but people around the world.
Navid Jamali, what was interesting, when the Snowden revelations came out, after they came out, there were big tech companies that had cooperated with the NSA. There are tech companies who had refused to cooperate with the NSA. And there are companies that had cooperated with the NSA, but that the NSA had nonetheless spied on behind their backs. Do you take the point that Edward Snowden makes, that we're now all a bit more vigilant when it comes to what's right and what's wrong, and that can only be a healthy thing?
Well, I have to take exception with the term, you keep saying spying and surveillance. The United States does not spy on its citizens, and it does not surveil its citizens. That's a big, big, big distinction. I mean, we don't have a program that's looking at our citizens to make sure that they're not going to try to overthrow the government. When you think of a government spying on its citizens, you think of some two-bit dictatorship that's constantly, in fear of its citizens, of an uprising. So now into the question about privacy. I think privacy is a very, very important one. Frankly, when it comes to big companies like Google, Facebook, where they make money on selling your data, the data that you create, and there's a lot of questions there as to who owns that, and things to that matter. I'm sorry, I go back to Snowden. This is just knowing who he is and what he did. He's blown himself up. He was at the lowest level network. He was the guy that reset your password. All right, he has no operational experience. He has no understanding of these programs. He basically stole files and released them. To sort of come back and say that he's this meta, uber expert in privacy and security and policy is absurd. Privacy is obviously an important thing. It has brought to light serious questions about what consists of privacy, what expectation does one have, especially when it comes to, the bits and bytes of the digital world. But, I don't think that there's this massive policy underway where governments are looking, free governments, Western governments are looking to quote unquote spy on their citizens. They're looking to ways to protect their national security using data. That's totally different.
So, excuse me, let me get this right. Snowden was a low-level system administrator, and still, not only did he get access to all this documentation, being a low-level system administrator, but why not? So it explains a lot about the NSA cyber weapons being released and sold for auction. You have a major security flaws in the NSA. If you let a low-level system administrator get access to all this documentation, that can't be serious. The NSA is really serious when it comes to security. I can't imagine a low-level administrator having access to all this. It doesn't sound legit.
All right, we're getting
into... He was a contractor. In fact, he was not even an NSA employee.
Yeah, no.
He was a contractor.
That's exactly what he was. He was a nothing, a nobody.
We're getting in the discussion to something which is interesting, which is this relationship between the public and the private sector. Edward Snowden himself coming from the private sector, and then the idea of how much governments cooperate with private companies. In the case of all these big tech companies, Zachary Miller, after all we've been through in this country over the past year and a half with terror attacks and the such, we're now discovering that there's a big problem with encrypted social networking sites. How do you go about it? Do you ask them to voluntarily cooperate, or do you force them to unencrypt what's encrypted?
Well, I think anyone who goes on a social media site should know that their information on there is not secure at all. That's first. I mean,
even if this website, this social networking site, Telegram, that people have been talking about, that these
Telegram is specific
that they've been using.
Telegram is different. First of all, because it's not American. Second, because it was built as a company to evade the power of state. It's a company who is located in different country to evade certain laws, just like other companies do this to evade tax law. Telegram has done this. So Telegram might be really secure. The best proof is that all French politicians now use Telegram because they're afraid of any kind of American technology. And most people who want some kind of privacy do not use American technology.
But in light of word now that there's this French jihadist who's been
it is used
using
by
it.
It is used by jihadists.
How does the government handle it? What do they do?
They can't do anything.
Well, what should they do?
Nothing, apparently.
Nothing much, because if you forbid Telegram, they will use open source software, and there's no way you can stop this. They will use basically RSC and OTR. I guess you two guys know what this is, and there is absolutely no way you can stop this. They will use Tor, who has been financed by the American government. There is absolutely no way you can spy on this. The only thing Telegram has is that it's easy to use. But give me 10 minutes, I'll show you how to use OTR and IRC, and you'll have the same kind of privacy protection using open source software nobody can stop.
Right now in the U.S. Senate, there's a bipartisan push for a bill to give law enforcement access to encrypted data, and lawmakers and the intelligence community are divided over whether it's better to work with the tech companies on a case-by-case basis or force them to comply and help. Strongly in favor of the bill is the head of the NSA. Here's what Admiral Rogers had to say. ISIS remains the most adaptive target I've ever worked in 35 years as an intelligence professional. Naveed Jamali, What do you do with things like we saw with that case in San Bernardino where the FBI ordered Apple to unencrypt a telephone?
Well, again, they didn't order Apple. They brought it to trial. They brought it to court. I don't think that the federal government can quote unquote order any private company to do anything.
Really?
I don't think it's to the U.S.'s benefit to actually go down the road of bringing these types of things to trial. I understand both sides of the coin here. Clearly, technologists are not building technology so that jihadists can avoid detection and plan out attacks. I know that's not the case. On the flip side, it's important to understand that counter-terrorist intelligence officers are not looking to stamp on privacy. They're looking to stop real terrorist attacks. There should be, I think it's to everyone's benefit to find a common ground here to solve this. I don't think any of the panelists want another terrorist attack. And clearly, we all acknowledge that the unintended consequences of these programs of encryption is that terrorists are using it because it allows a way to communicate without oversight, and that's a problem.
Zachary Miller?
Yeah, I'm not. What I'm concerned about is the liberties and freedom of the American people. I don't want government snooping in every aspect of Americans' lives, and you all should agree with that too. Now, the fact is. Sorry?
Yeah, they're not. They're just not. That's terror.
They're not reading your emails. This is they're collecting metadata.
I know all about metadata. I know all about metadata. And I also know what else has been going on for years. And we could get into the discussion. We're just going to have different opinions about that. But what I'm talking about is that for too long, we have been fear-mongered into giving more and more of our freedoms and our civil liberties up. And that's got to stop. There's no reason for that. We can have security and we can have civil liberties and freedom and privacy at the same time.
James Kirchick, you agree?
Well, I think the very fact that we're having this conversation, we're talking about the United States as if it were, East Germany, is a victory of the Russian influence operation that Snowden is. Snowden is a Russian influence operation, and your guest on InfoWars should understand that. And the fact that we're not talking about what the Russians are doing within their own society, what the Russians are doing in terms of espionage and snooping and surveillance all throughout Europe.
My film talks about what the Russians are doing too. It's about global surveillance.
The Russians are doing the same thing.
We've all said that.
Way less
Russians,
money,
the French, everyone's doing the same thing.
The Chinese are doing the same thing.
We're talking about big bad America.
James Kirchick, the reason probably that we're talking about America, part of the reason is that we discovered with the Snowden case, again, we, the general public who don't follow this on a day-to-day basis, that it was a startling reminder that the internet plays by American rules. The big companies are American. There were efforts, you'll recall here, in Europe to build some kind of big search engine that could be a rival to Google. That went nowhere. The point is we've discovered that, and Fabrice Appelbois mentioned industrial espionage, but we've discovered how basically we're all using the internet, and the internet is largely American.
That's not is that news to anybody? I mean, seriously? Was this a shock to anyone that the United States spies on people, that the French government spies on people? Who was legitimately shocked by this?
Most people in the French public who use the internet on a daily basis and didn't really realize all the consequences of this.
Can you or any of your guests name a single French citizen, an innocent French citizen who's been harmed by the NSA, who's had harm done to them by the NSA?
Most employees in Airbus industry, maybe?
How?
You're talking about this.
Stealing industrial secret. That's what the NSA does for the last decade.
Oh, please.
So
you're talking about one
this
isolated incident that's not even been confirmed.
That's not an isolated incident. Come on. Your weapons have been put to auctions. Your cyber weapons have been put to auction recently. And the sample that was released by probably an insider job from the NSA proves without a shadow of a doubt that during 2003 and 2009, the NSA was able to go through most popular firewall and steal industrial secret. That's a fact. That's
with all due respect,
that's an economical war.
Are the last people to complain
and in
about
front of this
espionage.
economical war, you have Putin setting up an information war based on hacking, which is kind of clever. And basically what Putin is saying to Obama is checkmate. It is kind of clever because where the Americans were using extremely sophisticated hacking, Putin is using information war and hacking because he doesn't have the same hacking capability. which is pretty smart coming from Putin.
All right, but Fabrice, let me
evil.
ask you about James's point. I mean, we all remember, for instance, what it was. American executives were warned not to take Air France because there were bugs in the seats.
Oh, we do the same.
At the time.
And we're pretty
So
good.
how are the Edward Snowden revelations new in that case?
What Edward Snowden revealed, even to people who knew most of what the United States was doing in terms of cyber espionage, was how big the cyber power of the United States was. It is tremendous, absolutely tremendous. And it is a threat to many, many countries. It's an economical threat to Europe. It's a democratic threat to many other countries. And it's basically a cyber war going on for the past decade against many countries. Iran being really a symbol. I mean, Stuxnet and the aftermath of Stuxnet.
That's a good
and
thing.
the retaliation.
That's a great thing. Stuxnet,
Well, it's not
Stuxnet is a great thing.
Not such a great thing, because yes, it's a great success in that
stopping the Iranian nuclear program isn't a great thing.
Program was stopped for 4 years, but the retaliation from the Iranian, which consisted in stopping the Saudi economy for more than a month and stopping 5 major U.S. banks from having any kind of activity, was a clear proof that this is a Cold War game. The United States, despite its huge power when it comes to cyber espionage and hacking, cannot destroy another country, because the other country will send its own missile and can also dangerously harm the United States. So basically, here we are. We're in a cold cyber war.
All right, just a point here. On Wednesday, Amazon launched in Germany and Britain something called the Echo. It sits on your kitchen counter, and thanks to voice recognition, it can play music, turn off the lights, tell you who won the Stanley Cup in 1994, and of course, order products on Amazon.
How's it going?
And
just finishing up right now.
I want to ask you before you go, James Kirchick, about this. Would you be happy with something that listens to all of your conversations sitting on your kitchen counter like that?
I probably wouldn't, and I would choose not to buy it.
All right. How about you, Naveed Jamali?
Response.
Listen, when I get off here, I'm going to put my tape back on my camera on my webcam, so that should give you an idea of where I sit.
Okay. But what more seriously, though, Naveed, people are buying into this. They are this product has generated a lot of excitement. What does that tell you?
You know, anything that creates data is something that can be, captured by someone else, and you have to be okay with the fact that the things you do on the internet, the things the devices that transmit data, can be co-opted by anyone. It's just the reality. I'm not terribly worried about it. Look, I went against the Russians. I don't think the Russians think that highly of me. It's just part of my life. I know that, and it's going to be part of our lives going forward. You have to be okay with that. It's, I don't really have anything to hide. I think that if you do, don't use the internet. Probably the best way to avoid anything.
The Russians, we've seen them in the news this past week with they're accused of leaking the doping records of famous athletes. There are also all kinds of accusations that cyber hackers sponsored by the state could somehow have an influence on the U.S. election. What's your reaction to that, Naveed?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, Russia, as I dealt with them, they still are very much in a Cold War mentality. They view the U.S. as their main adversary. Anything that causes chaos domestically to the U.S. is a benefit to Russia. Russia is incredibly aggressive. They've got expansionist goals. They're in Syria. They're in the Ukraine. They're clearly looking to destabilize us. I mean, it's never changed, as well as NATO. So
Thank you.
Nothing surprises
Can I take off my mic?
in terms of information warfare. I think that is something that they will, we talk about Snowden. We should really be concerned about Russia. This is not a good thing. They are not a free country. They clearly have goals to move west in Europe, and it's something we should be concerned about.
Zachary Miller?
I agree. I agree we should be concerned about all of the global intelligence. And Russia is, of course, a very, very main player. They could have done this. But anyone could. Getting into that website, any number of hackers could do that. Kids could do that. So, I mean, of course, there's a problem. A lot of major organizations and companies do not have strong security. I mean, that's obvious. And I agree with the idea of putting your tape over your camera. I do the same thing. We've been doing that for years. But recently, FBI director came out and advised people to put tape over their webcam cameras. You know, that's the world we live in.
Is it something you do personally?
Personally, yes.
Fabrice Appelbois, because it's been an election cycle now where we're getting more and more into conspiracy theories. And what are your thoughts now going forward? Should we be afraid of the internet and take out typewriters to send each other messages by the mail?
Typewriter is not an option. If you start using typewriter, your productivity will drop and you will be smashed by the competition. So it's not an option. Security, well, when you're facing the NSA, let's be clear, it's not really an option anymore. It's extremely hard to protect yourself from people like the NSA or any kind of high-level secret service. One thing you have to keep in mind is that, yes, you produce a lot of data. It's going to be intercepted by U.S. companies and therefore by the NSA because the Patriot Act and gag orders are legal fact in the United States. But on the other side, you can't live with those technology. What you have to really keep in mind is that times are changing, and especially in France, tomorrow's political regime could be something else, not a democracy. And the same metadata that is totally innocent today could get you into real trouble tomorrow. For example, if you're gay in France today, there's no problem. Tomorrow, who knows? We are in a period, especially in Europe, of extreme political instability. All those technology who do not really represent so far a major threat to European democracy could be a major problem in the coming years.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there because we're running out of time. But I want to thank you, Fabrice Appelbois. I want to thank James Kirchick in Washington, Navid Jamali for being with us from Seattle, Washington, Zachary Miller, whose film comes out in the spring.
Yes.
Film comes out in the spring. Thank you for being with us. Stay with us. Our Media Watch segment is next. And we say hello to Emma James.
Hi there.
Who's been scanning the open web.
I have indeed, yes. And you really can't get away from Edward Snowden right now. He is absolutely everywhere. Although the man himself has been relatively reticent in terms of pushing his own agenda, in a sense. He did tweet this at the launch of that Pardon Snowden campaign. Today, the world's 3 leading human rights groups asked the president to reconsider the war on whistleblowers. But since then, he's basically been retweeting all the other endorsements that he's getting. He's not really doing his own PR work, if you like, and maybe he prefers other people's words to carry more weight. This kind of image from Amnesty is everywhere. Why the President of the United States must pardon Snowden, and the image there, Edward Snowden fought for our freedom. It's time he had his own. Now, Amnesty appears to be trying to appeal to Barack Obama's vanity, I think it's fair to say, by saying that leaving Edward Snowden in limbo will be a stain on President Obama's legacy. Now, whether that will actually have any impact on the president's decision or not, who's to say?
There's an important factor in all of this. We haven't seen a very recent poll, but one done last year showed, hold on, I have the numbers somewhere, 43% of Americans are against a pardon, only 33% are in favor.
Mm. Yeah, I didn't know what the polls were. I don't think President Obama will pardon. I'm in favor of a pardon, of course, and a lot of people are, but I just don't know how that's going to turn out.
How do you explain that? The majority of Americans are against. They do see him as a traitor.
Well, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and they really don't have the full story. Hopefully that's what the film will accomplish, getting the full story out there.
If we take a look at what The Atlantic has to say on this one, they're among those asking if a pardon is in any way possible. And they basically, to sum it up, I suppose, are talking about whether or not Obama sees this as a sign of benevolence and kindness and strength, or whether he would see it as a sign of weakness to issue this pardon. Now, they think that even if Obama is considering changing his mind, because remember, he's already refused to pardon Snowden, they say that his advisors will tell him this will play into the hands of your critics, those ones who said he's weak on national security issues, and it says will fuel attacks that Obama has a habit of apologising for America. So that's the view of The Atlantic on this one. He is, though, gathering quite a few big-name supporters, among them Bernie Sanders. He has talked, although, to be fair, it's not the most ringing endorsement, if you like, because he acknowledges the importance of the information that Edward Snowden made public. But
yeah, he didn't call for pardon, he calls for some form of clemency.
Exactly. He says there is no debate that he also violated an oath and committed a crime. So pretty strong words there. However, he does want him to be shown clemency because he thinks he shouldn't go to jail and he shouldn't be consigned to permanent exile. Susan Sarandon, the actress, is far more fulsome in her praise of him. He did this country a great service for no personal gain and at massive personal cost. Now, one of the things that really could sway Barack Obama's opinion is the court of the public, if you like. And that's where this movie from Oliver Stone really could come into play. This article from Wired talks about the fact that, you know, this movie has just had its premiere. The Pardon Snowden was launched the next day. It's out in the States on Friday. It doesn't come out in France until November, so you have to wait a little bit for that one. But what they say about the film is that it really bleaches out the shades of grey because, as you were saying, it is it's not a black and white topic, but the movie has made it appear so. And it is that idea of, you know, one person's hero whistleblower is somebody else's traitor.
So only in America. If the movie's good, he's got a higher chance of pardon. If the movie's bad, he doesn't.
Well, maybe.
I want to thank you, James. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.